Today on Excellent Leadership with Sam Adeyemi.
So my encouragement is, instead of you focusing on the ones that have been caught stealing from the government purse and from other places, drop the stone.
Welcome to our broadcast today. We continue with our discussions on love. And today, we want to approach this from an interesting perspective. I observed something about Jesus, that when they brought people who were really bad to Jesus, Jesus was very lenient on them. He was very kind to them. It's amazing. They brought a woman who was caught in the very act of adultery, and Jesus was merciful to the woman. Amazing. The people that Jesus really had serious issues with were hypocritical people, and they were usually the leaders. So, as we study how to love, because that's our master key. Jesus said that's the greatest commandment. You get it right with love, you get it right with everything else. He said, all the commandments hang on loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. So you can't love and fail. Anyway, so they brought this woman to Jesus, and she had committed this horrendous sin and so on, and the law of Moses said she was supposed to be stoned to death. What did Jesus have to say about that? Amazing, the perspective that Jesus brought to it. But our focus today is not on the woman, but on the people who brought her to Jesus and what Jesus dealt with them. You know what? When we deal with our own issues, we'll be able to help other people deal with their own issues. I don't know, but it seems like fallen human nature thinks that if we cut other people down, we'll feel more comfortable with ourselves because we'll have low self-esteem anyway, but that never ever solves any problem. So let's go into this message. Very interesting one. It's titled, Drop That Stone. I'll see you at the end of this broadcast.
Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. It's on the screen. Let's go. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Good. We'll title this discussion, Drop That Stone. I got that from a story in John chapter 8. A story that I found very fascinating. John 8 from verse 3. The Pharisees and the scribes brought a woman to Jesus who had been caught in adultery. They said to him, the law of Moses says that we should stone someone that is caught in adultery. What do you have to say? Verse 6 says, this they said, testing him that they might have something of which to accuse him. First, when I read this story, I just try to imagine the amount of shame that woman must have felt that day. Brought out in the open, daytime, shamed. And the people that brought her were not common men, because again, when I gloss over the passage, my assumption is it was just some ordinary men. They were powerful people. They were leaders. They were the religious leaders of the day. They were scribes and Pharisees. She was shamed publicly. She didn't deny what she had done because she was caught in the very act, they said. Don't mind the fact that it was only her that they brought. Committing adultery with herself. by implication. Don't mind that fact. But when I read the story further, especially when I read verse 6, this they said, testing him that they might have something of which to accuse him. Then I realized actually that the woman was not even the object of their anger. The real target was Jesus. It was Jesus they actually wanted to stone. And this woman was caught in the crossfire. We're talking about love this month. And I realize that this just falls in line with the way the Bible structures it or explains it. That when it comes to love, you can't talk about loving God without talking about loving man. You can't separate the two of them. When they asked Jesus in Matthew 22, which is the greatest commandment? Matthew 22, 37 to 40. He said, this is the greatest commandment, that you love the Lord your God. He said, the second one is like it, that you love your neighbor as yourself. When John the Apostle explained it in 1 John chapter 4, verses 20 and 21, he said, anyone who says that he loves God but hates his brother is a liar. He said, how can you love God whom you have not seen and not love your brother that you can see? He explained in verse 21, this is the command that we received from him, that he who loves God must, that's the word he used, must love his brother also. So that's his interpretation of what we read in Matthew. It doesn't seem like so in Matthew. In Matthew 22, they look like two separate commands or commandments. But John the Apostle says, no, they are intertwined. They are connected. That actually what Jesus was saying is that you cannot love God and not love man, because every human being is an extension of God. Man's body may have come from the soil, but man's spirit came from inside God himself. When he created man and breathed into his nostril, it wasn't just air that it was pumping into the body. It was the spirits of all human beings that he was releasing there. Every human being is an extension of God. So whatever you do to man, you've done to God. God will feel it. Amazing. So in the bid to hit Jesus, they're going to hit also a woman caught in the crossfire. But my focus is on the fact, or is on how Jesus resolved it. Jesus didn't answer them. He was writing on the ground. So verse 7 says, so when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, he who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. Isn't that scary? Don't you think that would have put her life at risk? He who is without sin, let him throw a stone at her first. Verse 8, and again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. Amazing. Every single person. These were not church members. These were leaders. Every single one disappeared. Beginning with the oldest. What did Jesus say? If you don't have sin, stone her. So they said they ran away, beginning with the oldest. Ostensibly because, obviously, he had the greatest volume of sin because he had been around for the longest time, okay? So the oldest, to the youngest. So they had sin. Amazing. Amazing. And they wanted to kill someone for committing sin. You know what I see from the Gospels? When we relish the idea of bad things happening to bad people, it's a sign something is wrong with us. When we delight in the idea of someone being punished, of something bad happening to someone, it's a sign there's a problem somewhere. Because in Matthew 7, Jesus said, "Judge not so that you will not be judged. With the same measure that you judge, it will be measured back to you." Then he said, "Why are you concerned about the speck in your brother's eye when there's a pole sticking out of your own?" He said, "Remove the pole in your eye, then you'll be able to see clearly that it's just a speck in your brother's eye." So it's our problems that magnify other people's problems. Amazing. That's what I see from the passage. I know that